Welcome to Remarkable Retail Podcast, Season 11, Episode 6. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Steve Dennis.
On this episode, a very special guest is David Kahan, President and CEO of Birkenstock America, a remarkable brand and retail story 250 years in the making. This isn't a history lesson, though. David talks about keeping the brand anchored in its tradition, but contemporary in the modern context. Steve, this is a fun and I found a fascinating interview.
Yeah, well, I'll try not to steal too much of his thunder, but as a brand, it's super interesting because, well, I often get asked, I think you do as well, what brands that got into a lot of trouble or just kind of stagnated have been able to really resurrect themselves. And Birkenstock was never really in trouble, but they certainly have taken the brand to a whole new level over the last decade or so, which we talk about. And they did go public about a year ago. And since that time, they've put up some good numbers, continue to open stores, open wholesale partners, innovate on the product front. So I think it's a real, whether you're particularly interested in the product or what have you, I think most people will find lots of lessons about how to revitalize a brand and keep that growth story going. Fantastic.
We'll get to that a little later in the show. Now, you're just back from traipsing all over parts of Europe. You were in one of my favorite cities, Amsterdam. How was your travels? And what did you see? What do you know?
Oh, it was good. Yeah, I was with my kids in Amsterdam and Berlin, and then over to Prague for a few days. In terms of things that are kind of customer experience related, I did, as you heard, get a bit delayed. And I'm not going to necessarily mention the airline, but their initials are AA. And they managed to give my seat away. Not just my seat, but several other people that were connecting from Prague because the plane was a little bit delayed. And despite the fact that we got there with the gate still very much open for a bunch of minutes, there were no seats to be had. So I got to spend a unscheduled evening in London, which normally would be okay if it were a bit more planned. So I got back a day later than I planned and fighting through the jet lag, but I think I'll be able to stay awake for the time it takes to record this episode. But we'll see. It's still early in the episode, so create a little drama for the listeners.
All right, let's turn our attention to news of the week. So once again, deja vu all over again from 7 years ago. The U.S. government's closed for business. You're just back, but certainly you've probably been keeping up a little bit of what's going on. What does it mean for the economy that retailers rely on and the retail industry? Early days, but what are your early thoughts?
Well, we'll see. The danger, as we often say when we talk about some of these news stories, between the time we record this and the time that people actually listen to it, things might have changed. So I'm not necessarily going to go too deep, but here we are, a few days into the shutdown. Just for some of our international listeners, without going too deep, the issue is largely over the Democrats wanting to extend the Affordable Care healthcare subsidies and the Republicans not wanting to do that. The impact of this is, first of all, healthcare premiums are going to be going up a lot, which is an issue I think we've touched on before. So just in terms of consumers being squeezed. But the particular thing here is many millions of people will have their healthcare go up to a completely unaffordable level. But there's also a little bit of Democrats wanting to push up against the Trump agenda more broadly. So we will see where this goes, but the implications, at least if this were to continue more than just a few days or more than a week, is lots of cost cuts and the Republicans perhaps using this as an excuse to permanently reduce some of the federal government overall expenditures and jobs. So there's actually nothing that requires them to do this. In fact, in other shutdowns, this has not happened before. So some of this people think this is a bit of a smokescreen. But just a quick stat to give a little context to this. The federal government has already cut 275,000 jobs before this. That is the largest reduction in civil employment, federal government employment, since World War II. So we're already seeing a lot of job reductions, and we may be about to see a lot more. So that would be quite significant. Of course, there's the ripple effect of that. So we'll see. This could be very significant, but perhaps cooler heads will prevail, and this will get resolved quickly. But, the timing of this is pretty bad. The more evidence we've been getting over the last several weeks is that the job situation is pretty shaky. Private jobs continue to be reduced. So it's a pretty precarious situation on top of, inflation and on top of the tariff impacts, on top of a lot of other things that might make this holiday season a little bit shaky.
All right. While you were away, miss a little, miss a lot, never ending story. Some new tariffs came down while you were in Europe. This time, some pretty real consequences for many, many industries. Talk about what you know and what you think about it.
Well, the latest round, and they're already, one of the things that's really complicated, I guess, to unpack about the whole tariff situation is there are these country tariffs, now there's sector tariffs, there's exemptions. And so to really try to paint the full picture is pretty complicated. But the specific thing is that Trump is levying 25% tariff on top of furniture or on the part of furniture and kitchen cabinets and some other wood products. So depending upon the country of origin, this may not be all that different than the tariffs that are in effect. So anyway, but obviously it's a big industry. You're talking about expensive stuff to begin with for the most part. So another 25% on top of that is pretty significant. A lot of the furniture players have already been working through their supply chain over the last several years. Of course, a lot of that was to get away from China. And now we've got tariffs on some other countries that are pretty significant. So there's full effect of this. But let's just say many of the furniture players got hit pretty hard. Their stock prices got hit pretty hard because this is viewed as a pretty significant hit to profits and demand. So we'll see how that sorts out. Then the other just kind of macro thing that's tariff related is what's going on with farmers, particularly soybean farmers. I don't know if anybody saw this last week. There are quite a few posts that I saw on LinkedIn and other social media that showed the drop in volume of soybean exports. And it's very easy to visualize. It basically goes from a very high number to zero to China, which was a big, yes.
I don't think they've shipped a bean to China since the spring, which is just shocking. It's always been competitive between Brazil and America and other providers, but now all that business is gone, and it's been a record year for crops across North America. So two things happen at the same time.
Yeah, so if you're a soybean farmer and China's huge export market that has gone to zero, that is obviously extremely problematic. China decided to basically punish the U.S. for taking this action. And so anyway, I won't get into the whole thing. But, it's a very obvious specific effect on the impact on a section of the U.S. economy from this tariff policy. But of course, Trump set the house on fire. And then, he's now coming in suggesting that he's going to bail out some of the soybean. So I don't know. It's not clear to me. So, consumers are paying more money. Farmers are in economic trouble. Now taxpayers are coming along to have to bail out. I don't understand the point of any of this, or at least doing this in this specific way. But this, of course, is not the only situation like that. It's just kind of the most extreme. The other thing, as I saw this morning, just as we were about to record this, again, because consumers are saying, suddenly all my prices are going up. And this is really putting pressure on me. So Trump is now considering a dividend. So, he breaks it and then tries to fix it by, I don't know. The whole thing to me is just...
the good news is it's not investment bankers getting a bailout this time. The bad news is didn't have to happen this way. So, we'll see.
Yeah. It's totally predictable. Lots of people could see this coming from a million years. But anyway, from miles away.
So let's talk about TikTok. You and I, how the sausage gets made, insight for the listeners. You and I have recorded and pulled more TikTok segments out than I can imagine, because we record it and then we listen to it and we go, well, nothing really happened, so let's not talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Right, or something changed between the time we recorded it. And it's like, like it's literally been half a dozen over the course of the past couple of years. Now, it seems to be getting a little clearer. And let's anchor this in. You had a prediction about TikTok, so take us through it. Well, just quickly, my prediction was that despite the Congress passing basically outlawing TikTok in the U.S., laws used to be important, but not so much anymore. But anyway, I said I predict that TikTok's still going to be around by the time the year ends. Now, we're not to the end of the year, but obviously, as most people would know, Trump has kicked the can down the road in terms of acting on what Congress passed, because a deal is just around the corner, a deal is just around the corner, a deal is just around the corner. Well, now it sounds like there is at least concept of a plan for a deal. We have not seen any of the details, but quite a few things have been teased or leaked out. So it appears that the deal is in play, that is in place, is there will be a joint venture for the U.S. operation. A bunch of basically tech bros, rich Trump supporters, most notably, I guess, Larry Ellison, but Mark Andreessen and a bunch of other folks apparently will be the investors. A lot of people feel like this is a bit of a sweetheart, or you could say corrupt deal, because most people feel like, most people that know more about this than I do, feel like TikTok valuation could be 20, 30, $40 billion. The number that has gotten out is $14 billion. So we'll see if this is exactly what happens, because again, and we haven't seen all the details, and most of this is just from reporting, but it does appear like we're on the cusp of a deal.
All right. Well, let's see if this edit gets left in this episode. It'll be a first in a little while. You may or may not be hearing this, sports fans. Let's talk about earnings. And by the way, I had a great time in Vancouver last week. I ran into a retailer, Brian, who's a listener. Shout out to Brian. One of the things he said he likes is when we cover off top line earnings. So let's get into it. We got three quick hits with some three great retailers. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, I may actually just talk about two in the interest of time. The two that I thought were most interesting, and again, listeners will probably know that, for the most part, we have a concentration of earnings that occur in about 2 or 3 weeks. And then we have some folks that are delayed for whatever reason or have different reporting things. So they're kind of trickling in, and then we'll be quiet for a while. And if the government stays closed, by the way, well, any of the little tea leaves we read from job reports and inflation and all that kind of stuff, we won't be getting that. So that could be interesting. Right. But again, we'll see what happens. But the two that I thought were most interesting, one is Costco. And the performance of Costco, just like we talk about Amazon and Walmart, these three big retailers, the three biggest retailers in North America, Costco is like the fifth biggest retailer globally. They just keep putting up amazing numbers. Costco has been gaining market share in both U.S. and Canada for many, many years. So just to dissect this a little bit, U.S. same-store sales were up 6%. Canada up 8.3% on a comp basis, and then e-commerce 13.5%. So
huge on a big base.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that's the other thing that kind of these huge companies that put up these big numbers. It's so impressive just because of their sheer size. So some of this is the flight to value. Some of this is they just are an amazing operator. But there are a couple things that were interesting that they also spoke to. One is they've added in the last few months these exclusive membership hours. So if you had a tier in their membership program, you get to come in this exclusive time where you don't have to wait on long lines, basically. And that apparently has been really, really important to continuing with their growth. The other thing, again, big base here, but they're going to open 35 more clubs. And then the other thing they said that I thought was kind of interesting, and I think speaks to some of the concerns about the economy and the holiday, is that they did make a statement they are reducing some of the more discretionary items that they're going to be carrying for this fourth quarter. So, trying to navigate a little bit, probably some of the concerns about inflation, but also just thinking, well, maybe if people are really watching their budgets, some of the items that are a little bit more around the edges, they're not going to carry. So, and then the other one I was going to just touch on, and this is one of these turnarounds that we've been watching. So Nike, some of our listeners may remember they've got new leadership there, or relatively new leadership trying to execute a turnaround. Nike's really had a rough go of it the last couple of years. They've had struggles with a lot of new competition like On Running and Hoka and folks like that. They got a lot of coverage about how they pulled back pretty extensively on some of their wholesale partners and kind of overshot the runway on their direct-to-consumer strategy. I think they really misread, as many folks did, how quickly e-commerce was going to grow. We had that big spike because of COVID. And I think a lot of people were like, we're going to the moon here. And actually, it's basically settled down, as we've talked about a bunch of times, to the same kind of growth rate. And they haven't really lit things up with their own store strategy particularly. So anyway, that left them exposed with basically not enough coverage in the market. So they've been going back emphasizing kind of getting more prominent position in Foot Locker, which is a big account for them, Dick's Sporting Goods, et cetera, starting to kind of rejigger their product line a little bit. So it's still early days in terms of some of these initiatives, but it did result in them having a sales increase, which has not been something they've experienced for several quarters. Now, this is also very new, but they've got this partnership with Skims, Kim Kardashian's brand, which just launched, which apparently is off to a good start. So some signs of life there, but it'll take a little bit more before we know. The other thing I was going to mention, though, and I think we are seeing more and more of people kind of saying the quiet part out loud, they said that tariffs were going to impact their earnings by $1.5 billion over the next year. That is up from what they initially said last quarter of it being about $1 billion. So I'm not sure how much of this is the tariff rates actually settling out a little bit and them just having more visibility to that, or whether they assume they might be able to price more or pass more of this on in pricing. They did say they're doing some of that, but a lot of it they're basically eating. And just for frame of reference, kind of their peak earnings in a most recent, like the last 5 years was about $6 billion. Hasn't been quite that high because of their sales struggles. So $1.5 billion hit against, hoping to get back to $6 billion is really quite significant. Now, maybe they're going to have some opportunity as the strategy take holds to raise their prices a bit more. I think right now they're just trying to regain market share, so they're probably not super excited about raising a lot of prices across the board.
Well, all right, great start to the pod. Now let's get to our amazing interview with David from Birkenstock Americas right after a few messages from our equally amazing sponsors, and then we'll be back to wrap up with final thoughts, so stay tuned. Promotional support for the Remarkable Retail podcast is provided by Crave Retail. What's retail's biggest blind spot? The fitting room. A shopper wants to buy, but can't get the help they need. That's why global brands partner with Crave Retail, the market leader in smart fitting rooms. Crave connects that moment to your business, giving shoppers a voice, associates real-time alerts, and teams the data to buy smarter. The result? Higher conversion, better decisions, a seamless experience. Learn how fast you can elevate your fitting rooms at craveretail.com. Promotional support for the show comes from Find Mine. In the time it takes to listen to this ad, your team could have leveled up their productivity by 90% and set up your brand for increased sales. Find Mine's AI tools let you run operations on thousands of products right now. Get self-service AI to support product tagging for better success with AI agents, dynamic programmatic ads for Meta, visually similar product recs, complete the look styling, trend and campaign curations. Find Mine's innovative enterprise platform currently generates breakthrough customer experiences for top brands like Lululemon and Ann Taylor. See what Find Mine can do for you and join the waitlist at findmine.com/remarkable retail.
Well, David, welcome to the Remarkable Retail podcast. We've been trying to get you on for a little while. We finally made it happen. So where are you coming to us from today?
Well, Steve and Michael, it's great to be with you. I'm all over the place, but today finds me on the East Coast, which is good. On my way to New York next week for a few little Fashion Week type events.
Very, very nice. Well, I'm all over the place too, but most of that is in my brain rather than physically. But anyway, enough about that. So we've got a lot to talk about, but perhaps we should start just to make sure people know a little bit about who you are, how you got to be where you are, and the work you do at Birkenstock.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, basically, I've grown up in the retail and wholesale world. I like to say I went from working 12 hours a week part-time in Macy's to 12 hours a day in the executive training program. I fell in love with it. I became the company's first ever athletic footwear buyer back in the day when athletic footwear was just breaking through into the mainstream in malls and in department store assortments. I eventually eventually made my way to the vendor side, the brand side. And eventually I was leading Reebok when we were acquired by Adidas, or as my colleagues in Europe call it, Adidas.
Yes.
I eventually moved into the brown shoe world when I took over Rockport, which was one of the brands in the Adidas Group portfolio. And somehow, maybe having managed, in a German-led company, maybe I became known for, being an American guy who knew how to do, deal with that and manage that kind of enterprise. And Birkenstock came along. And I mean, here it is. It's this incredibly iconic brand, probably the most iconic brand in not just footwear history, but almost in any branded history. And it was a brand that I had a personal connection with. I always wore it. I was a longtime Birkenstock guy, even back when it was like, the weird Strange-O shoe. And I met the gentleman who became the first non-family leader for Birkenstock, Oliver Reichert. And it's been a match made in footwear heaven for the last 13 years. And I joined as chief executive officer of Birkenstock USA at the time, eventually became CEO of the Americas. And now I serve as president and managing director of Birkenstock Americas as part of our global leadership team.
Well, it's been quite a journey now. The three of us share some history in that all three of us have worked for brands that are several hundred years old. Unfortunately for Michael and myself, those brands are no longer really operating, but Birkenstock thankfully is thriving. But maybe just a tiny bit of history, because the brand is 250 years old or something like that. So maybe just talk a little bit about the history and evolution of the brand, and then we'll talk about the amazing growth story.
Sure. Birkenstock dates back 250 years to a small village in Germany where a gentleman by the name of Johann Birkenstock was just obsessed with foot health. He studied, he dedicated his life to orthopedic benefits, and he invented what we now call the footbed, footbed, literally an anatomical bed for your foot. And quite literally, it took 3 generations of Birkenstocks for this concept to evolve to what it is today. I mean, we shouldn't forget, in 1963, the family was laughed off of the show floor at the Dusseldorf Trade Fair when they showed up with this strange-looking cork footbed with the strap across the top. So this has been a pretty incredible journey to take this from a small village in Germany to now, the streets of cities around the world. It's pretty exciting, and we, managing the brand now, consider ourselves just the steward of this incredible family legacy.
Any brand that's going to have a history like that is going to have a trajectory, and it's sometimes the case that something unusual happens, something unexpected. So something unexpected happened in that 250 years. Talk about it.
Yeah, what's most interesting about this brand, when you think about brands, you think about them having their moment, so to say. This is a brand that has had moment after moment after moment. Now we've been able to maintain that moment way more than previous generations. So if you go back prior to our administration, Birkenstock had those little moments. I mean, it had the hippie and the Grateful Dead and the Berkeley thing. Then it kind of went dormant. Then you had a little grungy thing, and, Marc Jacobs did it, and it kind of went a little dormant. And then Heidi Klum. And then when our administration came on board, we realized that there's something more to this brand. So if you look at the first moment, sure, Phoebe Philo on the runway with Celine, kind of like bringing Birkenstock to the fashion world. Okay. But what we did after that was really, really important. Instead of just treating it as a moment, we treated it as a moment in time to really crack open the value of this brand. So you think about it, moment after moment after moment. You had Frances McDormand on the red carpet at the Academy Awards wearing a Valentino dress with Valentino collaborating with Birkenstock. You had the Barbie movie, which could have been this moment in time, but what it really became was, instead of Birkenstock having a Barbie moment, it was almost like Barbie had a Birkenstock moment. And then you have John Cena coming out, completely naked on the stage of the Academy Awards wearing Birkenstocks. This past weekend at the Venice Film Festival, you have Jason Momoa in a pink suit with pink Birkenstocks with his toes painted pink. So it's moment after moment after moment that make up a lifetime of a brand that just has resonance beyond any trend.
So what I'm curious about is, that obviously doesn't happen by accident, right? So what's the lesson for marketers and leaders around how to take the core of what you have and amplify that like you guys have?
Yeah, amplify is a good word, because the lesson is, number one, we never deviate from our DNA. So if you look at the Birkenstock collection, every single product, every single one is built on the footbed. It's like the chassis of a car. And then you can say, my colleagues overseas may not understand this reference, but retailers in the US do. We play Mr. Potato Head on top of it. So the product becomes just the vessel by which we bring the footbed experience, being a purpose-led brand, to the end user. And the difference with Birkenstock versus most other products is, once you wear the product, once you wear it and you have the footbed experience, you go from being a consumer to being a brand fan, a stark raving missionary. So if you notice one thing, we have no tagline. There's no Birkenstock, just do it. Basically, Birkenstock becomes this organic, word of mouth, missionary-led brand that is almost like its own flywheel. The more products we put in the market, the more people wear them, the more people recommend them. I mean, the average person who owns Birkenstock in the United States owns 3.4 pairs in their closet at any given time. Now, that's what we can statistically say. Anecdotally, we believe it's a lot more, but I don't think there's many things, let alone shoes, that somebody would own over 3 at any given time in their closet. So we never deviate from our DNA, and we practice the strictest commitment to what we call engineered distribution, which is super important, and it's been the foundation of everything we've done here. We never deviate from engineered distribution.
I know what you mean about that 3.4. My daughter came home with somebody else at the yoga studio had grabbed her left side of the shoe. She came home with 2 right side Birkenstocks. So that's the 0.4, I guess. So she's got the 3.4. I just wanted to follow up on Steve's follow-up, so to speak. And these moments that keep happening, and it's so intriguing. It feels like there's a confidence in you and in the team that organically these will just continue to happen. Is that a belief nested in this long history? Because sometimes history, you get a bit too overconfident, but there must be some purpose and purposeful placement behind it. Or is it just this relentless confidence, as you say, that once people are trying such a great product, it's just going to become part of the culture, that this zeitgeist?
We don't take it for granted. And we have a relentless commitment to not be satisfied where we are. I would say we have not just certainty, it's beyond that. It's what I would call absolute certainty, but we don't take it for granted. I remember, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 2 years ago, some of our retail partners and people in the industry would say, David, when are you guys just going to go on autopilot?
Right.
And I would always say, like, autopilot. And I always ask the question, is this as good as it gets? Well, what you thought 5 years ago is not as good as it gets. It's this relentless commitment to, number one, share the brand with every man, woman, and child on the face of the earth. should ideally have the benefit of wearing a Birkenstock product. We say that our addressable market, our total addressable market, is every Homo sapien, everybody who walks on the earth, because, and I know if you're some kind of, Wall Street analyst, you probably think you're out of your mind, but Birkenstock is the next best thing to walking barefoot on soft ground. And, as somebody who grew up in New York knows, the average New Yorker walks 3.2 miles every day. You're not barefoot walking on soft ground. So we provide a purpose-led product to consumers. And what we've done is we've democratized it. So this is something that is within reach of anybody who wears shoes. We're not talking about the 1% luxury end, although we have a Paris office that does things that are, seen on runways around the world. But we also sell, EVA footwear that you can wear to the beach and kick off by the pool. So this is one of the brands that, when you talk about amplifying and unlocking value across each distribution channel and each demographic, we believe we have products that can serve the purpose and never deviate from what a Birkenstock is.
I'd like to go back and pick up on what you talked about, engineered distribution strategies. Can you talk a little bit about how, because my sense is not only obviously have you grown a lot and done a lot of product expansion and all these marketing activations, but the way you've been disciplined about going to market seems to be a pretty big part of your success. Is that right?
It's aside from the brand and the respect for the brand and the fact that we will never, ever, ever do anything to compromise our brand equity. Brand equity is omnipotent to us. I mean, Steve, you talk a lot about, the fact that, there's just there's no shortage of retail. There's just a shortage of remarkable retail. And remarkable retail is consumers coming into contact with brands that they really love. And what tends to happen, especially if you look at recent results, the brands that maintain their equity and are distributed in a manner that's consistent with the brand, mainly full price selling, in the right points of distribution, presented the right way, those tend to be the brands that are in demand. And, you guys use the word, and I love that you use it, bifurcation. There is a huge bifurcation happening in the market right now. There's a bifurcation between labels and brands, and then there's a bigger bifurcation that leads our engineered distribution strategy, which is the bifurcation between brands people like and brands people love. And if you have a brand that people love, you owe it to your broad demographic, the consumers, your retailers, your stakeholders, to treat that brand with the equity that it deserves. And that's what we do. Every point of distribution is chosen with discipline. How much we put in each point, we like to say to our retail partners, we're not a sell-in organization, we're a sell-through organization. Every single person in our Birkenstock Americas leadership team, everyone has a retail background. We all came up through retail. So we don't view the brand through the lens of a sales vendor relationship. We view it as a brand management retail mindset. And it doesn't matter if it's our own D2C or it's through a retail partner, it's one channel of reaching the end user. And I think that makes all the difference. And that's a long way to say that engineered distribution is just never compromise the brand value in any decision to chase short-term results.
Can you talk to us briefly maybe about the role of, I forget how many of your own Birkenstock stores you have, but as you look at D2C, whether it's your online presence or it's your own store, how is that shifting?
Yeah, it's funny, 250 years and this whole history. We've only been in the direct to consumer business less than 10 years. So, how long has ecom been going on? Geez, I was with Reebok when we launched ecom. I think it was 2000 or 2001 maybe.
Yeah.
And I remember people laughing like, "Oh, who's going to buy a shoe online? Ha ha ha." Well, for Birkenstock, we didn't launch our digital until I think it was 2016 or 17. So we have a very, very important digital presence, not just in the Americas, but across EMEA and as we expand the business in APMA also. Our digital business allows us a direct pathway to connect with our brand fans. We have 10 million plus members who are deeply engaged. Retail stores is a different story. Retail stores, we're just really getting into right now. We haven't had the bandwidth until now. We're closely getting to 100 worldwide across the Americas. We only have, give or take, one or two for opening a dozen. But we will be opening more stores. It will become a more substantial part of our business. Number one, putting on a Birkenstock is a tactile experience. We really believe that somebody sitting and fitting and feeling the footbed and seeing the full breadth of the assortment is something important. Missionary work, back in the old days when people carried Bibles, happened door to door. So missionary work happens store to store, and we believe in that. Having said that, once somebody comes into our universe through a store and they become an online customer, that's fantastic also. But having said that, we have incredible retail partners. And where we show up at retail, we show up incredibly strong. They're a point of customer acquisition for us. I don't want to sound too agnostic to where somebody ends up purchasing our product. But, as speaking of the U.S. and the Americas, when you only have 12 stores spread out over 50 plus states and all of Canada, we're in some great locations. We're very disciplined where we open. We're not haphazardly opening stores. And what's really unique is each store we open is a real community experience. It's not a cookie cutter. Don't take this the wrong way. It's not the Gapification of Birkenstock. The stores are unique. So if you're in the Miami Design District, it's one vibe. If you're in Austin, Texas, it's another vibe. And we get rave reviews on the stores. I've been in stores where people walk in that are longtime Birkenstock fans, and it's like they've come to their nirvana, like the holy grail of Birkenstock. And then I've been in the store, I've stood there in Soho, and people come in and they go, "Hey, I've heard about this Birkenstock brand, but I've never really come into contact with it." And then somebody in the store quite literally talks to them about the footbed and the benefits of it and all the different styles we have. And it's converting people one by one.
It's interesting listening and reflecting on what you're saying about the stores. Does the product assortment change? Like, as you think about each unique character, you talk about Miami and Austin. Do you take that right down to product strategy, or is this mostly a customer experience, customer relationship, customer acquisition? It's not really, it's also sales, of course, but just expand on that for a second or two, because I'm kind of curious about the inherent strategy and what you called your distribution strategy.
Yeah, it's both. It's the experience and the assortment, and it's no different than what we do with retail partners. The assortment for a Nordstrom store in Bellevue, Washington might be different than the Nordstrom store in Aventura. We have a team of retail analysts and planners. where we basically know door by door by door, each Dillard's location, each of our partners, and we understand the differences and the nuances. In our own stores, it becomes even more special because, as great as a retail partner is, and I was just in Century City Mall, right by Beverly Hills, and I walked through Nordstrom and I walked by Bloomingdale's and I go, oh my God, we have mind-blowing brand assortments, but it's not, they just can't house the full breadth of the line.
Right.
So again, you go to the Miami Design District where our neighboring stores are Valentino and Dior and, Christian Louboutin and Louis Vuitton. And our assortment in that store is far more premium. So our 1774 Paris-led collection and collaborations is probably 3 times the penetration there that it would be in Williamsburg in Brooklyn or on Newbury Street in Boston.
And I guess that's how you convince the landlords to let you into their assortment, right? Because they're going to choose neighbors beside those brands very carefully, right?
What's really unique for us is we have landlords that covet having Birkenstock. Again, it's not the mass rollout of generic stores. Each store is unique, and we wait. I mean, we are super diligent. We waited 2 full years until the space we wanted on in Soho became available. I'm a New Yorker. Most people walk east-west in Soho, not north-south. I knew that you want to cut between Broadway and West Broadway, so we're on that street. Newbury Street in Boston, we waited 2 years. Why? I wanted to be across the street from Nike, Lululemon, and Zara, and I wanted a coffee cafe right next to us. If I could pick a location now, it's near a Pura Vida that's opening, which is this, great little bistro that's opening all over, based in Miami. They just opened in Malibu, and they're expanding in California. And I think the really, really good retail landlords understand how to curate assortments now, just the way a retailer does. No longer is it, suburban mall and just walk through it and go to the food court and everything looks like it was in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. I really think that the best locations...
Great movie.
Great movie. I don't want to give you my Spicoli line. Anyhow,
I was about to.
Yeah. Best locations tend to be those that have really smart landlords that understand remarkable retail.
This has been really a masterclass in thinking about a product that has both longevity and relevance, current relevance, and keeping that going. But as you think about that, you've described often your leadership team and how you focus and where they come from and the work they do. But any lessons you could share about how you lead that team in such a dynamic business with a product that's anchored in such history, and you have a global brand and you have global head office. There's a lot of lessons, I think. But what are the kind of 2 or 3 top lessons you'd share?
I think the big ones are, number one, lead with your heart and lead with passion. Nobody and nothing that we do in our organization is bigger than this brand. The brand is omnipotent to everything we do, and we hold the brand with this, we feel blessed. We feel blessed every day that we have this brand with this heritage, and we not only don't take it for granted, we constantly think about how can we amplify it. And I said it at the beginning, but hey, I'm just the steward who's been here 13 years and as many more as I can possibly manage in my life and stay healthy to do. But this is just my part along the journey that's been 250 years and will be another 250 years. So it's respect for the brand, it's trust across the organization, and it's an incredible level of communication across, our global home office in Germany, all of the regions around the world, and people that are spread across the Americas. Respect for the brand, trust in each other, and never deviating from the DNA of the brand, yet continuing to innovate and stay true to our mission, which is we sell products that bring people happiness and satisfaction. And I think in the world right now, as screwed up as the world is, people need more happiness and satisfaction, and that's what we provide. We do it by way of this amazing brand. That's just simply what we do.
Well, David, it's been such a great journey on the call and on the conversation, and congratulations on all your success, and we wish you continued success. And hey, thanks for being a listener too. That's for sure an added bonus. So, on behalf of Steve and I, thanks again for joining us on the Remarkable Retail Podcast.
Steve and Michael, thanks. We talk about fans a lot, and I am one of your fans, and I learn a lot listening to the show. And I share the show with my colleagues often, and I appreciate sharing time with you. Thank you.
All right, we are back. Such fun, actually. What a great interview with David, and thanks to the Birkenstocks team for helping us out with images and all those kind of great things and making it happen. So let's get to our segment. What do we want to call it? Let's give them something to talk about. Remarkable stories that are spreading. So let's end the pod on something really remarkable. What do you got?
One of this a little bit mundane, perhaps, but at this time of year, we typically have heard multiple retailers, Target, Macy's, et cetera, talk about their hiring plans for the holiday season. So just for context, Challenger & Gray, a firm that keeps track of these things, said that at this time last year, major retailers had already indicated that they were going to add over 500,000 jobs in the fourth quarter. Well, virtually no holiday hiring announcements have been made thus far, including by some of these brands that regularly comment on that. So the interpretation of this is, well, maybe there's nothing too exciting about the number of jobs that they plan to add. This is also in the context, a related story was a survey of store managers basically commenting on what their management has told them. And about 50% of the store managers surveyed said that they have been warned to brace themselves basically for more price increases by the end of the year. And 47% of people in the survey warned or said that they had been warned about delayed or reduced inventory levels, basically pointing to what tariffs are doing. So I think, it's not a direct thing, but it's kind of interesting where we're starting to get this nervousness, I think, about the holiday season really starting to be part of the conversation.
Well, my thing to think about is actually related to yours, and that is Doug McMillan's pretty remarkable statement around AI. Now, we haven't talked about AI yet in the episode, but he said basically millions of workers that AI will change literally every job. And I started to think about that and, in large and small ways. I mean, the vast, what do they have? 2 million people at Walmart under care, right? So the vast amount of these people, of course, are in the stores. They're not likely to be replaced by AI. But I guess his point was that the role they do, the help they have will be transformed in some way, shape, or form by AI. But I do think at the headquarters, store support level, we'll see if it's in the short term or if it's in the long term. I remember Scott Galloway would often say, it's not, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job with somebody who works with AI. I don't know. I'm starting to think you're going to lose your job to AI depending on what you do for a living. So I think it's not the first time we've talked about it. But, when someone like Doug McMillan, who's a great leader, stands up and says, get ready, I think we better pay attention a little bit closer to that. All right, next segment. Let's peek around the corner. Let's what's on your radar screen? What's on our radar screens for the next week or weeks ahead?
Well, I'll mention three things really quickly. One we've really already talked about is, does this government shutdown resolve itself quickly and with minimal harm, or is there something bigger? And again, we don't know, but I think we'll start to have a much better idea pretty quickly. I think the other thing, and it gets to partially what you were saying about AI, is as much as we've talked about inflation, as much as we've talked about tariffs, I think the real thing, whether we're in the U.S. or Europe or Australia or wherever people are listening to this, is what happens with the job market. And definitely in the U.S., as we touched on, there's a lot of warning signs that people are not hiring or hiring much less than they were. And things like AI and things like earnings pressures and people using AI as kind of an excuse, perhaps, as well as a real reason to start to reduce things. So, yeah, to your point, how much of this is 3 months from now, 3 quarters from now, 3 years from now? It's a little bit hard to say, but I think really paying attention to whatever information we're able to get on the job market over the next few months is pretty important. And then the last one is, with all the nervousness around the holiday season, I think there's a whole question around, does Christmas come early, and can we read the tea leaves on anything that's going to happen over the next few weeks? So we've got Amazon Prime Days coming up really fast, but also Walmart, Target, a bunch of other retailers are doing their own events, I think largely as a response to what Amazon does every year. But also I think there's just generally this sense of like, let's get that business from the consumers, while we can, because maybe as time goes on, there's not going to be as much money to spend as you actually get closer to Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all those kinds of things.
Well, it'll be interesting to watch, particularly discretionary spending, because that's kind of the canary in the coal mine, right? For many retailers, is what starts happening to those things. We've already had Costco already signaling kind of woeing back on discretionary type purchases. I'm thinking about, and of course we watch with great attention this $100,000 H-1B requirement. And, I'm just very interested in the kind of rewiring of work in general. And of course, many people are thinking about what is travel going to look like into the U.S. 2019, as, if the shutdown kind of drags on, then you start to have the airports start to gum up and lots of people, just sand in the gears of commerce. I was on the stage last week in Vancouver with Brian Hill, founder of Aritzia. And one of his top things, and he's got a lot to think about, and they're tracking fantastic numbers. He was talking about the de minimis rate in Canada. Of course, the U.S. went to 0, and he said, well, maybe we should go to 0 too here in Canada. So this rewiring is some pretty fundamental things. We'll see what the policymakers make of it. But it was interesting that Aritzia would be very focused on and thinking about de minimis, because it is impacting the way they're moving goods back and forth across the border. So these, I don't know if I'd call them unintended consequences or unexpected, but in some way I didn't think of this impacting retailers the way that they're articulating it is. So anyway, I'm watching all those things kind of closely as the year kind of wraps to a close.
Yeah, the thing I would add to that, which is probably a topic for another day to really get into, is I really think that the more we hear commentary from people, whether they're on stage, like you mentioned, or just in these earnings releases or whatever it might be, realize that they're the more immediate impacts, but so much stuff is still, being worked through, supply chains being rejiggered. What's the response to pricing? I think it's very clear that most retailers have not been very aggressive about raising prices. Now, some of that is just seasonally the way things work, and there's price tags. Do you take them off? You reduce. There's just like so much noise in the system, which I think is kind of, it's not kicking the can down the road, but people are learning and responding, and then their responses aren't things that they can necessarily do the next day, the next week, the next month, right? It may be, oh, okay, now that we learned this, how does this affect our spring season, right? So, which is still, many months off, right? So I just think there's a lot to unfold here, and it's very difficult, I think, to make confident predictions about the way some of this stuff is going to play out.
All right. Well, that was a great episode. Great to have you back on this continent, my friend. Congratulations. Get some sleep as you adjust to that jet lag. But great to have you back. And of course, we'll be back each and every week. Let's leave it there.
Thanks for tuning in. To help more retail leaders discover the industry's leading podcast, please drop us that 5-star rating and review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you enjoy your pods. And for more on my strategic advisory services, keynote speaking, best-selling books, and even more retail industry insights, go to stephenpdennis.com.
If you are a brand or service provider looking to take your influence to the next level, reach out to us for sponsorship, advertising, or event partnerships. And if you want to learn more about my own keynote speaking and advisory practice, reach out to me via LinkedIn.